Let's dive into a story that might just change how you see the night sky. What if I told you there's a chance it's not just a moon, but something far more mysterious? Our tale begins with a wild idea that's been floating around for a while. Some folks think it could be hollow, maybe even a spaceship from a galaxy far, far away. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, doesn't it? Now, why would anyone think that? Well, it all starts with some oddities that scientists have noticed. For starters, when astronauts landed on the moon, they found something unexpected. The moon rang like a bell when they crashed a spacecraft onto its surface to test seismic activity. Not exactly what you'd expect from a big old rock in space. And then there's the matter of the moon's surface itself. It's got these craters that, oddly enough, are all about the same depth. No matter how big or small, they don't go deeper at a certain point, as if, maybe, there's something stronger underneath stopping the craters from forming any deeper. But wait, there's more. Ancient stories from all over the world talk about a time when there was no moon in the sky. How could different cultures, miles apart, all have such similar tales?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Deceptive Reality podcast. My name is the confused Nick, and with me is the peerless Bert.
Oh, peerless.
Yeah, and confused. I'm confused, you're peerless.
Okay.
Does
that mean I'm on a pier?
No, that means that no one can match you.
Oh, that's a lie, Nick. Usually we don't lie to the folks right away, but I see that's how we're starting out this time. Listen, hey, sometimes we gotta lie to the people.
I gotta spread the good word about my fine co-host here.
Well, you're not confused, Nick.
Oh, I'm confused.
No way, man.
Don't
Nick,
you
let
know
me tell
why
you.
I'm confused?
Why?
Because you've been threatening me with education for the last week.
So on Monday, I think it was it Monday or Sunday? It doesn't matter. It was one of those days Nick and I was talking. Typically we record on Mondays. And I told him, I said, don't freak out. Okay. Don't freak out. I'm going to tell you guys too.
Yeah, and I did.
And Nick instantly freaked out.
Freaked. Yeah,
Which
that's the best way to get me to freak out.
Just goes to show, don't ever tell Nick, don't freak out.
Yeah, don't say stuff like that, or don't, if you're a lady, don't say we need to talk. I ain't into that.
Valid. That's a valid one. That's probably my least favorite thing.
Oh yeah.
Like if Jess says, hey, we need to talk this evening, I'm like, what did I do?
Just pull out the suitcase under the bed and start packing.
Exactly. Like finally she figured out I'm a doggone deadbeat, doggone it.
Doesn't she know you're peerless?
I wish she would learn, because good night. There's just no love for us peerless people. But I told Nick, I said, listen, we're going to do something a little different this week. I'm going to be honest with everyone. This is going to be a two-parter. There's no way around it, because there's a little education in this. Now, to give everyone an idea, this is subject matter that I thought I knew a lot about. And then when I started doing research, I said, I am absolutely stupid.
Okay, now I'm freaking out a little bit more again.
Well, listen, it's fine. It's fine. You might be smarter than me on this.
I don't think so.
I did a lot of research, and I went to scientific journals for some of this. And determined that I will never, ever be a scientist. But to make it easier for everyone, just so everyone doesn't freak out, I'm going to add graphics in the video. And I have dumbed this thing all the way down to where I can understand it. If I can understand it, the vast majority of the world, even if you don't speak this language, will probably know what this is. So I think that everything will be fine. It's just always scary whenever we try something a little different. So this is a mystery, but I'm tagging a few mysteries all together is what I'm going to say.
Interesting and terrifying.
Yes. Now to give everyone an idea, and again, Jess was with me when I was working on this weekend, and I had like 80% of it done coming into this weekend. And then I said, okay, I'm going to do all the scientific stuff. That'll be really easy. That was the hardest part.
Yeah, because that's the thing they say about science. It's super easy.
Yeah. They always, what is it they say? It's hard to be a rocket scientist or something like that. Yeah. So when I told her what it was about, she gave me that look and she goes, oh boy.
Oh.
So this should be a fun one. And of course, everyone that can read the title and you see the thumbnail, you already know what it is. Now, the $1 million question is, Nick, do you want to know what it is? Oh, also, before we begin, to give you guys an idea, after I added all the science, my original narration for this thing, just the narration for this thing, pre-science, was 33 minutes.
This ain't a 2-parter. This is a 9-parter.
With the science section, I was up to 48 minutes and I had to cut it down to 23 minutes.
Wow.
So we're a smidgen over 23 minutes. So this will more than likely be a 2-parter, but there's going to be a lot of fun stuff. We're going to do science first, and then we're going to go into some theories.
Okay, just in case any of you listeners are a little worried at this point that you're not going to understand anything, me either. Like, we're in the same group. If you are afraid that this is going to be too much for you, me too, buddy, me too.
Y'all are going to be fine. This is going to be a fun one. I promise.
Okay.
My goal, and I told Nick this also, I think it was on Monday. I said, I'm going to be on this side of the football field. You're going to be on this side of the football field. And my goal is for us to get closer to one of the sides.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not really worried because I don't have to know what's going on to have a good time.
That's right. Are you ready to find out what the subject matter is, Nick?
Bring it on. Let's do this.
Let's go.
Listen, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
If I was to ask you what is the moon, how would you answer? Maybe you would answer that it's been Earth's constant companion. Perhaps a symbol in our myths, our poems, and maybe even our dreams. But what if everything we know about the moon is a carefully constructed story? A deception so grand it has fooled humanity for centuries. Tonight on Deceptive Reality, we pull back the curtain on a theory so audacious, it will make you question not just the heavens above, but the very ground beneath your feet. What if I told you the moon might be an imposter, a hollow alien artifact hiding in plain sight? From ancient legends whispering of a time before the moon to modern scientific anomalies that defy explanation, we're delving into the mystery that has puzzled astronomers, sparked conspiracy theories, and ignited the imagination of civilizations.
Cannot believe you have done this. I am telling you right now that you have some heavy lifting to do if you want to meet in the middle of a football field on this topic.
That's fine. Listen. My goal, so everyone knows, here's where I think most people screw up as a society.
Okay.
And I use this analogy with everything. So it's not just, I know everyone has heard me talk about it from a religious standpoint. Mm-hmm. I'm also going to talk about it from a life. So when was the first time you heard about the moon, Nick? Just period, the moon.
And before my regular memory extends, I'd assume like that's
so
real
as
early.
A kid.
Yeah.
As a kid, your parents tell you that's the moon. We hear, really cool man on the moon, or the moon's made of cheese, or whatever it may be, right?
Yep.
And I think that's what makes it so interesting is we're told what everything is. And then as we get older, they go, that's all superstition, or it's just funny little fairy tales, or, it's just a fun little myth, or, whatever it is. But we kind of leave everything there. So we just accept what we're told and we keep moving. No differently than I say, if you go to a church and you've got religion and you just listen to the pastor and you don't read the book yourself, you don't really know what you're getting into.
Okay.
So what made this such a fun subject and why it's taken me an entire 6 months to do this, it was either the first episode of our podcast or the second one. Somehow the moon came up, Nick.
Oh, it was the second.
The second podcast.
Yeah,
So-
I remember it well.
And I think Nick thought I was kidding when I said, basically the equivalent of if the moon is real. That was the statement I believe I made.
Oh yeah. I still to this moment thought you were kidding.
Yeah.
Till right now.
Till right now. In fact,
I'm still not sure.
Well, what's funny is enough people has seen that podcast in my life that when I go places now, sometimes they'll use the terminology of, well, that is if the moon is real. So, whereas Nick doesn't have to deal with this as often as I do, I have to deal with it a decent amount.
No, I think most of the people I know are on agreement that we believe that we believe that the moon is real.
I mean, get it. Hey, I get it.
Yeah.
It's easier to believe that and just go with it full bounty. I think that's a beautiful thing.
I'll tell you, it's an interesting thing, and I would love to be won over, but I don't think you can do it. I would like to believe this.
I believe, Nick, you said that on one prior thing too, when we first started, and you said,
yeah.
You said, good luck getting me on that side of the fence.
Yeah, you kind of won me over on that one too.
A little bit. I didn't bring you all the way to the dark side, but I made you question things. I made you go, might be something to that.
Yeah, I feel like this one's going to be more difficult.
I think this one is going to be easier.
If someone wants to believe in something, it's kind of easier to at least temporarily convince them. So, I just can't see myself saying, their moon's not real. This is my prediction. The best I'll say is that's given me something interesting to think about. That's where I think I'm going to land.
For sure. Yeah.
Which is not a bad place to be.
Because here's the thing. At the end of this, I have no clue what's going on with the moon. I don't know if it's real. I don't know if it's fake. I don't know if any of the theories that I have here are correct. But here's what I know. I know that I don't know.
All right. So I've got one question. And depending on how you answer this question is going to determine how easy I might be to sway over in this topic.
But no pressure.
Oh, no, there's a lot of pressure on this one.
Okay.
A lot of pressure on this one because I cannot allow this to descend into complete madness.
Yeah.
Do you believe the Earth is flat?
No.
Okay, I'm receptive to what you're going to tell me then. You increased your chances by 30%, at least.
Here's the thing, though. I look at flat earthers and I think to myself, I haven't went that far along the grain yet, but I got to give them kudos because they're willing to think even farther out of the box than me, and I never thought anyone would ever be able to do that.
The best thing I can say about flat earthers is that they are distrustful of authority, and they have reason to be, but I doubt their choice in battles. I think there's a lot of other things you've been lied to about, but maybe this isn't one of them. I don't know.
I can definitely see where you're coming from. It's funny because someone that was at my house this weekend, we was talking about this episode.
Oh, man,
And-
everyone knew but me.
Well, we had guests, so the conversation came up while the guests were here. But when I told them this was my topic, they looked at me like, what is wrong with you? And I felt like a flat earther for just a minute.
Oh, no.
But I told him, I said, you just got to listen to the episode. There's something to it. Now, Nick, to make things easier, I've provided you with a folder that has a cheat sheet in it. And now
is it time to open it?
You can. Just don't scroll down the page. You're going to want to start with 1, and we're going to go down.
Okay.
Now, I also added hyperlinks to that page. For anyone that's on anything other than YouTube, I'll put these pictures up on our social medias. For those on YouTube, you'll be able to see it while we have this conversation. So the first thing I want to do, the very first thing when we talk about the moon, there's 6 different theories of how the moon was created.
Okay.
And I took the 3 most popular because I can't go into every theory on everything. So I went with the most popular. And by that, I would say 75% of every scientist fall into one of these 3.
Okay.
That's
now,
the
I've
bulk.
seen things that look similar to this. So I'm with you so far. I think you'll not lose me on this.
Yes. So what we're going to do, I want to go over the first one so you guys kind of understand what we're working with, and Nick can understand. The most popular by far is the giant impact hypothesis. Now, again, I've made this narration to where hopefully everyone can understand it. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about it. We're going to see where everyone else falls into these 3 that believe in the moon and that it was formed. And we'll go from there. Fair enough?
Yeah, that sounds fair. I think after you answered my question, I'm like way more receptive. So convince me, Bert. Convince me.
Here we go.
Venturing into the epic narrative of our moon's origins brings us to the giant impact hypothesis. In this theory, the Earth, still in its formative years, is confronted by another Mars-sized planet named Theia. Their encounter, a collision of unfathomable force, is poised to alter the very fabric of our solar system. The collision between Earth and Theia is theorized to have unleashed a massive amount of debris, a flurry of Earth's mantle and Theia's remnants into orbit. Under the relentless tug of gravity, this chaotic cloud joins into the body we now call the moon. It explains the similar isotopic fingerprints of Earth and its satellite. However, if the birth of the moon was indeed so violent, why does it possess a surprising abundance of volatile substances, elements that should have evaporated into the void of space during such a fiery genesis? Also, the moon's iron core is disproportionately small compared to Earth's, a curious fact considering their supposed shared heritage. The moon's orbit adds another layer of intrigue. It's slightly tilted compared to the path Earth takes around the sun, which is hard to explain with a giant impact idea. This tilt puzzles scientists and makes them wonder if there's something they're missing in the story of how the moon came to be.
So we didn't talk about this originally, Nick, and I'm curious before we dig too deep in here. Would you say that your thought process fell into the giant impact hypothesis?
I think I'd have to say so, because this is the one that's always been presented to me.
This is by far the most popular.
Yeah. My main thought when I was listening to that is just about the iron core, the size of the iron core. And one thing I'd question about that being a discrepancy is a collision doesn't mean like each thing that collided met at the core necessarily. Like it could have only gone part way in. So the different amount of iron core, that doesn't... I don't think that necessarily suggests that couldn't be the case.
It definitely does not. Everything that we talk about here is speculation. But the big speculations, and most scientists agree that even say the giant impact hypothesis is by far the most likely, that is something they struggle with, because what their thought process is for this is they believed that this other planet was going around the same time and Earth and it impacted at the same time. So there was never a moon. Those two impacted and they basically destroyed each other.
Okay.
That's what the theory is.
It's weird that they named it.
Yes.
Like, something about that is weird to me. Don't you think?
It's a little
I can't
weird.
put my finger on it, but that is weird.
It is a little weird. I was interested by it, but I was like, they probably get tired of just calling it the planet that hit Earth.
I'd never heard anyone call anything before. I always just thought it was like some big piece of space junk.
Nope. They're saying it was an entirely another planet about the size of Mars is what they said.
Okay. All right. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I'm used to.
Yep.
So that's the one I'm used to.
Now, one of the things that they explained, and I've tried to dumb everything down to where I can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
What they're saying is the scenarios that occurred, in which I didn't put all of it in because I didn't want to give away everything in the beginning. So
Right.
I went with some of the things that make it kind of weird. And if you look, I added some key takeaways and I added some breakdowns of what was happening. And then I added at the bottom volatile substances and elements in the moon's composition.
Yeah, that I'm curious about. I'd be interested to hear more about that.
So what they're saying is that stuff should not be there, or it should be there. They're saying that it was such a catastrophic event that if that's truly the way that it happened, those key things either should be there or should not be there based on what it is in that list. And again, I'm going to put this up for all of our people. I'm going to add some diagrams and stuff too. So one of them being water. And despite the moon's dry appearance, there's evidence that there is water in the soil.
Yep, that was a big hurrah a while back. I kind of remember that actually.
Yes. In addition,
Because that's when they thought they were going to find life there.
Correct. Correct. The second one is hydrogen. And it's found in trace amounts. And it's oftentimes bonded to other minerals. So again, they're saying that obviously we have water, we have hydrogen. The theory is if two planets smacked into each other and destroyed each other, the makeup and composition of both should be there in some regard. But it shouldn't be one has a whole bunch and one has trace amounts is what they're saying. Carbon dioxide is another one. So gases that would typically evaporate in high heat scenarios. So they're saying that should not be there at all.
Now, is this stuff that could form later?
If there's plants on the moon, because plants create carbon dioxide.
Well, yeah, that's kind of where I was coming at there.
Yes. At least as far as us humans, that's what we know. Now, is there another way that it could form? Possibly.
Yeah, but we wouldn't have anything to back that up.
No.
Now, I see one thing that I could come to easier in the long history of the moon is that maybe there was at one time vegetation. Because like you said, if we did collide, it's possible that some of the stuff that created life on our planet might create it on the moon, but maybe the quantities of certain things were smaller that made it unviable. And I'm wondering, maybe there was briefly life on the moon and then not. Who knows?
We don't know.
Not me, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. Neither one of us know. But hey, at this point, we're just talking through some things.
Yeah.
The last one that was on there was sulfur, generally considered very volatile. It's found in lunar rocks and it's more abundantly than expected typically.
Okay. That's interesting.
So for that being such a volatile thing, there really shouldn't be any of that on the moon.
Unless all the stuff we talked about earlier, probably.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. All right. You might convince me of something you're not trying to here.
Possibly, you never know.
You never know.
And that's the thing. The three biggies, I'm gonna tell everyone now, the three biggies is a giant impact. This, I would say, if you looked at science in general, I bet of the 75% that believe that the moon is clearly one of these three things, I bet probably 50% falls on this giant impact, maybe 55, based on what I can see. The other one is a capture hypothesis, which we're going to talk about next, and the assertion theory, which is the third one.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I've not heard a peep about these other two, so I'm kind of excited to learn about those.
The other three, I would say of the other three there's technically 6 that I found. One I would call pseudoscience all day long, which would fall into my stuff here after all these.
So this is your favorite one then?
Yeah, exactly. It should be the top list of mine. But
wait. Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, for sure.
Have you seen Moonfall?
Mm-mm.
Oh, I love that movie. You're gonna love it too when you see it.
I feel like I've had this conversation recently.
Yeah? I would be surprised if it wouldn't come up when you were talking about this topic with people.
It very well could have been. I feel maybe someone did bring that up to me because I remember that name. It doesn't matter. I'll look it up later. I feel like I've had this conversation though.
I might have fabricated this in my head, but that's what I assumed your position is the premise of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe it's not. I don't know. I wish you had seen it.
I have one thing that's coming up and I can't wait till we get there because I want to see your eyes when we get there. There's one thing that scientists straight out cannot. There's actually 3 things that scientists cannot explain at all.
Okay.
And then the rest of them is just hearsay, theory, speculation. Some of it's in writing, which is going to be that's going to be an interesting because I know you love history and we're about to.
Oh, I do.
We're gonna talk about some of that stuff. But the next one is the capture hypothesis. I want to get through the science of this first, Nick.
Okay.
Do you want to hear about the capture hypothesis?
Yeah, I've got a theory in my head about what that is, so I'm interested.
I'm surprised this one is as popular as it is because I think this one just sounds crazy, but
okay.
Let's check it out.
Now let's take a glance at the capture theory. This theory suggests that the moon, originally an interstellar wanderer, was grabbed by Earth's gravitational pull. But as enchanting as this story may seem, it finds itself on shaky scientific ground. Imagine the immense gravitational forces required for Earth to capture a body as large as the moon. Such an event would not be a gentle situation. It would be catastrophic, likely leaving behind a trail of cosmic chaos. Yet the geological record on Earth shows no evidence of such a dramatic disturbance during the time the moon would have been captured. Looking closely at the science, the capture theory doesn't quite make sense for how the moon moves now. If the moon had been captured by Earth's gravity, we'd expect it to have an uneven, stretched-out path in space showing its chaotic history. But the moon actually moves in a nearly perfect circle around Earth, which is unusual and suggests it might have formed in a more orderly way. Furthermore, the plot thickens when we consider the composition of the moon. Our celestial companion shares many similarities with Earth's mantle, suggesting a common ancestry. In the tale of capture, however, the moon would likely be a stranger with a distinctly different composition, a remainder of its birth in a distant corner of the galaxy. The concept of angular momentum is also quite telling. This is all about how things move and spin in space. The way the Earth and Moon move together doesn't really match the idea of the Moon being captured. It's more like they started together. Their movements are more in sync, like they were always a pair, rather than the Moon just being caught by Earth's gravity.
That's what I thought they meant, but I wasn't reading ahead. I was reading it as it went.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, from what we know of things that pass by the Earth, they're not really, in the same composition amounts that Earth is. And then I thought, maybe that's just me. And then I saw number 4 and I'm like, oh, good. What a relief.
Yeah. So it's pretty interesting when you look at the capture theory or hypothesis or whatever you want to say. For me, I would see this as being almost impossible. I know you and I have talked about this before when we talk about the actual, the way the moon and the Earth move together. And we've made a few jokes as time has went by, and we're gonna literally cover a little bit of that in the next section. But there's a lot to say about the shape of the moon. The moon is a perfect circle.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing a capture theory, it would not be a perfect circle. There's just no way.
Right.
Because first off, if you're capturing, that means the gravity force on both is so strong that they're pulling. There's going to be portions of it that's going to rip when that happens. And the circle rotation is almost perfect. It would always be more of an oval. And again, we're going to use a lot of simplistic terms. Some of you are probably like, man, Bert really went easy-go-lucky on this narration. I had to get it down to status quo for me to understand.
And me.
Because we doggone scientists on this one.
We're like parascientists. We're not regular scientists.
We only play scientists on the TV screen. That's what makes this one more complicated. This one has a lot of science to it. So I'm like, we really need to make sure that we make this easier to understand.
Yeah. I can understand kind of why I've not heard this one as much.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is not as likely with my limited scientific knowledge of the topic. But I think like the capture thing would have to be a very slow moving object. And I think that we've got examples of other planets that might have had their moons captured. And it's kind of like what you said. They're very irregular.
Yes.
Because they would have been coming in at a slow rate of speed, slowly enter the orbit around the larger planet or planetoid. Yeah. I'm not into this.
Think about it, though. Like when we talk about the slow speed that we're moving, do you know how fast we're actually moving in the space plane as a planet?
Oh, yeah. Incredibly fast. Incredibly fast.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
But to capture something, I think it would have to be moving slow by comparison to us. If it was going too fast, it would move past, I think. And if it was moving too slowly, it would never catch us.
I would agree with that.
But yeah, I don't know how scientific it is, but that's just how I'm thinking about it.
Listen, at the end of the day, I think everyone can agree, if anyone that knows anything about gravity and gravitational pull, you have something the size of the moon that comes in. How close is it going to have to get? And do you believe that after we capture it, it's going to make a perfect circle around the Earth? That doesn't make sense. In addition to that, every single year, what does the moon do? It gets further away from the Earth.
It's got elliptical motion.
Yeah, what it says, what they say is that if you was to walk on paint and then every single year you just stepped on the same footprint, that's about how much the moon is moving each year.
Interesting.
Is one layer of dry paint.
That's really interesting. I've never heard that before. That's cool.
I forget what scientist dude said that. It was on the YouTube machine, so that should be right. But some YouTube scientist said that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? That's not an outrageous claim, so I can accept that until I'm told otherwise, of course.
It is interesting, though, that we capture something, it goes into a perfect circular rotation, and then it goes away from the planet.
Yeah.
The planet that pulled it in, now it's rejecting it.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we've got examples of other moons that were captured, I think. And it's not the same.
Correct.
I think it's not the same.
That really only leaves one more scientific hypothesis on how the moon came to be. And then we get into what I call the fun stuff.
The wild side.
Yes, because we're going to talk about a whole bunch of different things. Some of it's kind of crazy. Some of it's kind of crazy. Some of it I really enjoy, and I think it's going to cause a lot of conversation. But the next one's the assertion method, which is the third most popular.
All right.
Have you ever heard that terminology before, Nick?
No, and I haven't got any theory on what this might be.
This one is pretty interesting. Let's take a little listen, and then you tell me what you think at the end of this one.
Okay.
The next popular theory is the accretion theory. Picture the beginning of the solar system, a swirling waltz of cosmic dust and gas. In this celestial environment, the accretion theory tells a story of simultaneous creation, where the moon and earth are born together, siblings of the same cosmic cloud. Envision the young solar system, a cradle of creation where countless particles collide and join together. According to this theory, the moon and earth emerged hand in hand from this primordial dance. It's a story of harmony and unity, suggesting a peaceful, gradual process of lunar genesis. However, as we delve into the heart of this theory, we find that it also has some questions that are not able to be answered. The primary challenge lies in the moon's composition. The moon shares certain similarities with Earth, yet it also harbors stark differences, particularly in its lack of volatile elements and a smaller iron core. How could two cosmic entities, supposedly born of the same material, end up so different? The story gets more complicated when we look at how the moon moves now. The accretion theory says the moon and Earth formed close together, but the way the moon orbits Earth today, including its path and how far it is from Earth, doesn't quite fit with this theory. Also, there's the issue of how fast the Earth and moon are spinning around each other. This spinning, called angular momentum, is really strong. The accretion theory, which suggests a slow and steady coming together of the moon and Earth, doesn't explain this well. It looks more like something dramatic and forceful happened to start their spinning, not a calm and slow process.
A lot to think about there. I'm still on number one, to be honest.
Sure. This would lean towards one. If you listen to that, the first thing it talked about is the way that the way that the moon and the Earth are responding to each other. There should have been something more violent to cause it.
Yeah, I would think so. Like the accretion theory or assertion or whichever.
It's
way
accretion.
you pronounce.
I was saying it wrong.
Oh, okay. Either way is good for me. First time I'm hearing it.
I was an idiot.
I'm thinking that this does happen. But like your narrative mentioned, I would question if it happens the same for a planet as it does for a moon or other things like that. Like, I think at some point this happens, but I'm not sure if I buy the moon and the Earth forming at the same time and then just deciding to go around each other. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know how many times in this episode I'm going to have to apologize for not knowing science better.
Well, trust and believe. This, like I said in the very beginning, this is a complicated one. To give you an idea, when I first started this, like I say, I went to the fun stuff first, and I'm like, for me to make this make sense to people, I have to bring the science in, because otherwise it's all speculation. I have no clue what in the world I'm talking about, because all these other theories are fun, but if I can, absolutely show all the holes in every single one of these theories, it doesn't matter what it is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I was going to talk about, which is, it goes into, and I'm looking through my notes. I've got so many notes. I'm sorry, folks. But I know you and I, Nick, have talked about this before in the past. In fact, I believe when we was talking about it, it was when you was trying to poke some holes in episode 2 when we was talking about this. Out of curiosity, do you know how perfectly the circle around the Earth is as a number? Like, how perfect do you think it goes around? Do you think it's a perfect circle? Do you think it's an oval?
No, I have heard that it's not a perfect circle. The Earth is not a perfect circle.
Okay.
And what was it more like? I can't remember if it was thinner at the middle and wider at the tops, but I know it's not a perfect circle or perfect sphere.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a question to kind of lead us in a certain direction.
Okay.
If it wasn't a perfect circle, how is it that we constantly have perfect eclipses?
are you talking about so we're talking about the shape of the Earth or the
Well,
moon,
if it was
or-
not a perfect circle,
right?
it would be smaller sometimes, bigger sometimes, smaller sometimes, bigger sometimes. Because the moon goes around the Earth. How many in the course of a month? How many times does it go around the Earth? 28, right?
Right, roughly.
Yeah, roughly 28. Slightly more than 28, but pretty much 28, right?
Right.
So if it goes around 28, and the perfect alignment with the sun happens every single time, and it's a perfect block out depending on where the technical center of the Earth is based on our tilt.
Right.
We wouldn't have that every single time if it wasn't a perfect circle, or it'd have to be extremely close, right?
It would have to be. I think it's close enough, but also there's certain ways you can tilt things that aren't spheres that will make the shadow of it appear a sphere. So that could happen also.
But not perfectly. Not perfectly
Not
every
perfectly.
time.
No, not perfectly every time.
And that's where the problem lies. And for the life of me, I'm trying to find this. I've got too many notes, folks. This is and there's too much science in this. That's part of the problem.
So does the science say it is perfectly spherical or not perfectly spherical?
You're about to find out, because I'm about to type this in to see if I can find it. Now, also, while I'm doing this, out of curiosity, Nick, if you had to be a guessing man,
Yeah.
do you know any other planets that have moons that might circle perfectly around like we have?
Off the top of my head, or no, you wanted me to guess. Well, they say Mars is the most Earth-like, so what about Mars?
It does not.
Okay. Are there
The
any?
vast majority of planets
Mhm.
does not have perfectly circular rotating moons,
Okay.
with the exception of, and the reason that I brought this up, because that was one of your arguments at one point in time, Jupiter and Saturn. And what do you know about Jupiter and Saturn? They're large, right?
Yeah,
Large,
very
a lot
large.
of gravitational pull. And their moons, there's a big difference in size between the moon and the planet, right?
Yeah, their moons are much smaller, I believe, are they not?
Compared to the planet, yes. Because
Yeah.
we're talking
How are
about
they
like
compared
Titan
to ours?
I'm sorry?
How are they
Well,
compared
what
to
I
our
mean-
moon?
What I mean is the moon versus the planet is circling. That's what I'm talking
Right,
about.
yeah. Yeah, definitely. The moon has to be smaller than the planet. Otherwise, it would be the planet.
Correct. So to give you an idea, and this is the easiest way that I can put this on a scale. If we're talking about an elongated circle, which is what most moons would have when they're talking, because again, there's a lot of different theories, an elongated or a perfect circle. If we was to do it based on a number where 1 is an elongated spinning and 0 is a perfect circle, right? The moon's orbit around Earth would be 0.0549. So 5/100ths of 1. The next closest is Saturn, which is more elongated than the moon to Earth.
How
So
much
it's
more is that one?
0.7 something.
Oh, okay. So that's a sizable difference.
200ths of 1. Yeah. Now here's where it gets crazy. It's about as close to a perfect circle as you can get, which we cannot find for the difference between the size of the planet and the size of the moon. That is not what typically happens. In fact, that is a complete anomaly, which we're going to talk about, and science cannot explain why that is.
That's interesting.
Yes.
I think our sample set is very small, though, so I'm not going to put an incredible amount of stock in that.
That's true. That's true. Hey, we can only talk about our galaxy.
Yeah. Like,
Now-
if we gathered
Mhm.
100 people in a room and gave them a quiz of all these different character traits, it's possible we might conclude with 100 people that there are no people with, I don't know, no people are albino, or we might conclude that there's no people with dwarfism or stuff like that. But if we have one in the group, we might say, well, this is a complete anomaly. This doesn't exist anywhere. So I think the numbers that we're studying are too small for that on its own to convince me.
No, I get it. 100%. Okay. I'm bringing things to the surface. That's all I can do is bring some.
I can tell by your voice you've got some real crackers that are going to come up. Some real zingers.
How about this? How about this? To make it fun, and I like making things fun.
Yeah.
Why don't I know we're buzzing through some of these quickly, but I want to get to some of the good stuff.
Okay.
Why don't we talk about what makes the moon so unusual? That's the next thing.
Yeah.
And that is going to talk about that perfect circular motion. But there's going to be maybe a couple little other small things in there that you might find.
I know there's something big in there. I can tell you're real excited for something that's coming. I can tell. I can see it on your face.
There's something coming up.
You're like, there's something that's going to blow his mind.
There's something coming up. It'll be here in a little bit. This one kind of breaks down some of the similarities that we was talking about, and maybe it'll break it down more elegantly than I can. That's the only reason why I said let's jump in this one.
I just got a feeling, but
there's one that I really want you to explain to me.
Yeah, that must be what I'm reading here. That must be what you're reading here. Okay, all right, let's do it.
Let's see what makes the moon so unusual, folks.
Let's explore the moon's unusual features, which are quite puzzling, and make us rethink what we know about our closest space neighbor. First, the way the moon moves around Earth is pretty odd. Unlike a lot of other moons, our moon's path is almost a perfect circle. If we measure how circular orbits are on a scale where 0 is a perfect circle and 1 is a very stretched out circle, the moon's score is about 0.0549. That's quite round, but not perfectly circular. This kind of round orbit is also seen in some of the big moons of Jupiter and Saturn, but what makes our moon special is a mix of different things. For one, the moon is pretty big compared to Earth. Also, the way it orbits is just right to make things like solar eclipses happen, where the moon covers the sun perfectly as seen from Earth. This doesn't happen with any other moon and planet in our solar system. Plus, the moon always shows the same side to Earth, which is another unique feature. All these factors together make our moon and its relationship with Earth really stand out.
Boy, that number 3. That see, that I've always had a trouble explaining to myself.
For sure.
I don't know. Man, number 3 is difficult for me because I'm like, I always heard the dark side of the moon, and I was
for sure.
When I was younger, I always thought,
it's famous from what band?
Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, right?
Right. But I always thought when I was younger, well, why would there be a dark side of the moon if it's spinning? We're spinning. Sometimes it's got to get, like, we got to see that. But so that one troubles me. So that's definitely a point in the direction of something weird's going on. However, I have an unlikely theory that, now that I think of it, could probably like bolster other moon ideas that the moon's not real. So, should I say it or should I not?
What makes the moon so interesting, and it's going along with what you're saying, is not the fact that there's one-offs.
Right.
It's the fact that there's a lot of one-offs. When you look at everything else in our solar system, when you look at it, it's a perfect circle. Do we see that in our current solar system? Yes. We see it with Saturn. We see it with Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter are significant gravitational pulls. The Earth, though it has a gravitational pull, is not nearly anywhere close to being as strong as Saturn and Jupiter.
Right.
So when you look at the difference in size between the moon and Earth, obviously, they shouldn't interact with each other the same way. But then when you add on top of that, the fact that the moon is the perfect exact size to give us a full solar eclipse. Now that is extremely important for our planet. Did you know that if the moon was 1/5 of the distance away, there would be any kind of animal on Earth? It's believed.
Oh, really?
Yes. Because the Earth supposedly creates everything that we need so that life can happen on Earth. So they're saying, like us as mammals, we would not exist if there was no moon. Now, would there be like what they believe is some sea creatures and stuff like that possible? But they're saying that like us, we would not have evolved to this point.
That sounds reasonable. What?
Because
so
like
if the moon was closer or further, would this also affect
Yes, correct.
that? Okay.
They're saying just like the Earth is the optimal distance from the sun. The
We are in
Goldilocks
the Goldilocks zone. Yeah, exactly.
Correct. The moon is
Yep.
also in the Goldilocks zone for us to evolve. And like, let's use, for example, the moon is what controls our tides. So our water flow.
Yeah.
As the moon goes around, it pulls the water. So it's constantly pulling the water on the surface of our planet. In addition to that, without the moon, our planet would not be in a perfect axis position, or as perfect as it is.
Okay.
So we're kind of locked in place to a degree by our moon.
Kind of unrelated, but it's still talking about the moon. Did you know that there's enough water composition in people that the moon affects them as well?
I did not know that, but that makes a lot of sense because when there's a full moon, people go a little crazy.
Yeah, it can actually cause imbalances. Now, the question is out whether it's enough to make people actually go crazy, but there are some differences when the moon's full.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I always said people got a little bit crazy when it's a full moon. Like whenever something crazy would happen at work, I'd say, is there a full moon? And we would look it up, and almost every time it was within the week of the moon being full. And I'm like, there you go.
Do you know what the young folks are saying now instead of the full moon?
What?
I bet you'll know it as soon as I say it. They always say, oh, looks like Mercury's in retrograde again.
Yeah, gosh.
I don't know how that become popular, but everyone says that now.
I don't know. That annoys me.
Yeah. If someone wants to explain it to us in the comments, that would be spectacular because I don't get it.
We're just old fuddy-duddies. We don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah. 1 foot in the grave.
Sometimes 2 feet in. Listen. So, perfect circle.
Yep.
It's the perfect distance. And on top of that, it's always showing the same face. We don't see that anywhere else in our galaxy. And listen, to your point, maybe we don't have a large enough sample. Not enough sample data. That could be why.
I know I said that earlier about that other thing, but to me, this one is different. And I'll tell you why. And this is going to make me sound like a lunatic, probably also.
Okay. Hey, I like that. Let's go.
The way, oh yeah, I am a lunatic anyway. But so, given that there's gravitational forces and that the moon is circling us, the only way, other than just an infinitesimal weird chance that the numbers line up, the only way I can think of that the moon would always be facing towards us. I can't believe I'm saying this. This is going to give people so much cannon fodder. Is that if part of the moon, the one facing away from us on the dark side of the moon, is cavernous or hollow?
Wow.
Because the other side would be so much heavier, it would always be pulled towards us.
That's interesting. Interesting you say that, Nick.
I wish I hadn't, but I had to let it out. I'm going to hear about this. I know I'm going to hear about this.
I mean, maybe not. Listen, we don't know what else is in this thing here, Nick.
Yeah, maybe. But, oh boy, I'm going to regret that later.
You just never know, Nick. You just, listen, sometimes you just never know.
Well, they say the Earth's hollow. Why not the moon?
That is true. Now, how much do you know about ancient civilizations and their thoughts on the moon?
I would say an above average amount, depending on the ancient civilization.
Okay.
But we'll see. We'll see, I guess. I know a lot more about history than I do regular science.
Well, there you go. Listen, hey, this might be your bang zone then.
Maybe.
I created a section on ancient times because I found some very interesting things a long time ago.
Okay.
And I said, well, that's weird. And I wanted everyone to hear some of this crazy stuff. Now, since we've looked at, these are the 3 theories. This 4th one is what makes the moon so unusual. I want to dig into what did the people before us say. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I'm wondering if there's one about the rabbit or not, but we'll see.
Oh, a rabbit, huh? Let's take a little look. Let's see what them ancient folks said.
Yeah, what do they got to say?
Let's take a trip back to ancient times, long before we had powerful telescopes and science to guide us, and explore how people back then saw the moon. To them, the moon was more than just a bright spot in the sky. It was a key character in their stories and beliefs. Think about a world where the night sky was full of tales. In ancient Greece and Rome, for example, they had moon goddesses named Selene and Luna. People believed these goddesses had special powers like controlling the tides and even affecting how people behaved. This shows how important the moon was in their daily lives and culture. But here's something really interesting. Some old stories suggest there was a time when there was no moon in the sky. Sounds like something out of a fantasy book, right? Yet this idea appears in different cultures around the world. The famous Greek writer Plutarch mentioned a moonless sky. Far away in Africa, Zulu legends also speak of a time with no moon. And in Bolivia, the ancient Tiwanaku people, along with the Greeks, had similar stories. These aren't just random tales. They're found in many cultures, which makes you wonder, could these stories be a shared memory from long ago, hinting at a time before the moon existed as we know it? What's more, these ancient views are completely different from what science tells us today. While scientists see the moon as a lifeless, rocky satellite, our ancestors saw it as something alive and powerful, playing a big role in the natural order of things. Now, about the idea of people traveling great distances to spread these stories, it's pretty unlikely. In ancient times, long journeys were difficult and rare. People didn't have the means to travel across continents and oceans easily. So the fact that similar moon stories appear in far-flung cultures is even more intriguing. It suggests these ideas might have developed independently rather than being spread through contact, pointing to a deeper, perhaps universal human connection to the moon.
Interesting. I do like those kind of stories, by the way.
Yes.
And I think every culture includes a time without a moon in their like creation myths and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The only problem is, I think if you go back to all these, you might find that they also speak of a time before the sun as well. That would be hard to believe. Well, no, I mean that's a thing that existed, like at some time in history, but people would have no way of knowing about it.
Some of these writings, though, talk about there not being a moon, and then there is a moon.
Yeah, that's hard to imagine, especially with what we talked about earlier about there having to be a moon for people that exist.
Now, there is a theory, and I'm going to throw this out there.
Okay.
The time periods that you're referring to when there was no sun and there was no moon, based on what this is, there was points in time when the sky was not visible. So there was so much particulation and dust in the air that it would just kind of be like noon or not noon, but like the equivalent of our 7 o'clock at night and then night.
Okay.
And you couldn't, through this dense particulation that was in the air, the dust or like volcanic ash or whatever might be up there.
Right.
You wouldn't individually see the sun or a moon.
That is true. That is true. So what's the theory on this, that like maybe generations grew up when it was still clouded, or?
That's what some scientists say, yes.
Okay.
That's where the theories come from.
I've heard before of volcanic eruptions blocking out the sky for years. But I don't know if I've ever heard a story of it being blocked out for generations.
No, but think about it. Let's say it blocked it out for 5 years.
Right.
If you're writing something, you're not going to talk about the sun or the moon before then. You're going to be talking about the fact there is none now.
Right. That's not how I've taken these stories, though. These stories seem to me to be saying there never was, and I feel like maybe it would make good fiction. But I don't know if these people would have forgotten that there is a moon up there. I just can't see it.
Or it went away. Some people believe that they were stolen.
Okay. You know what? I got to give you that one. Because that is something that happens in tales, and I can see people being ignorant and thinking that.
Even when you think about it, in biblical times, there was a time period when the sun did not rise. There was periods when the suns did not set. So
I got to give it to you. There's a lot of legends about the sun and moon being stolen. So,
and it comes down to, it's all based on the person's perception, because they didn't have science back then. No differently than even now, if you think about it, 15 years ago, I remember when scientists said the biblical story of the flood is a great fictional story. But clearly, the earth did not have a catastrophic flood. Yet, in most major civilizations of the time, they all have a flood story. The Christians have them. Obviously, if you go to China, there's stories of that. There's Russian stories of that. And we're talking non-Christian. We're talking just writings, literature.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't researched this, but there's also ones that don't.
Oh, I don't know. I would assume there could be. Yes, I don't know that for certain. I just know that there's a lot that does.
Here's an interesting thing to support what you're saying, though. Do you know that the world at one time only extended as far as the Pillars of Hercules?
What?
Do you know what the
Hit
Pillars
me with
of
that one more
Hercules
time.
So, so the Pillars of Hercules it's questioned where this is, but it's a point off of, I believe, Greece somewhere, that for a long time people thought that's the extents of the earth. Beyond that, there is nothing. So, the whole world and a flood that flooded the whole world wouldn't necessarily in those times have to have flooded the planet.
Oh, I see.
So, like, the further back in time you go, the world's a much smaller place. Big for you in those times because of your modes of travel. But a flood that flooded the entire Earth could have just been the size of half a continent back then.
That's valid. Could very well be.
Yeah, but there's... I like to think there's always some truth to mythology. And
Well, speaking of which, we talked about some mythology there. I know you love mythology.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know why they always portray the moon as being a female?
I think it was related to the cycles that females go through and the cycles of the moon. Yeah.
Correct. Isn't that fascinating?
That is fascinating. Yeah. And as soon as you said that part about the moon and being stolen occasionally, that is in almost all myths. So I feel like that does have to point to something.
Yes.
But
Now, what
is
that
it
is,
carrying me
we
all
don't
the
know.
way to a fake moon? Not yet.
Not yet. Not yet.
No.
I will say, as we get further into this, of course, there's always going to be more things that is just going to scratch your mind. And that's what I like. That's what I like.
I think that's really what you're going for, is to make people question
Correct.
these different things.
I just don't want people to look at people like me and go, you must be stupid if you think that the moon's just not a rock up there in space somewhere. And I go, well, the last time that you was there, what was it like? And they go, well, I've never been there. And I go, neither have I. So, like, how do you
silly
know?
fools, don't you guys know it's cheese?
Oh, man. The next thing that we cover is the first pseudoscience, is what some would call this. I would call this very interesting, and I'm going to add some scientific facts to this theory. It's called the hollow moon theory. I'm sure you've heard of this theory before.
Oh no, it's coming back to bite me already. Before we continue on this, I just want to say you are doing a fantastic job of presenting this in a digestible way, and you've made some really cool points that I haven't known. So
That's the only thing I've trying to do. That's all I'm trying to do.
I'm super into this. I don't know if you can tell or not, but I'm really into this. And you know what? I should make a confession. I kind of confessed it to you during one of the things going on. I'm going to play the opposite sides of this sometimes, even if I'm kind of buying into it. So just to let
That's
you
good.
know.
Hey,
We got to have two sides on these.
Gotta have two sides on this. Like I say, at the end of this thing, the only thing I want people to do is question and go, yeah, why is that like that? That doesn't make sense. This next section covers a biggie, a real couple biggies. There's actually, we're going to talk about this next section for a minute when we get done with it. Because
I put both feet in a trap for this. I know it.
This one is pretty interesting. This one, it breaks down, and I'm looking at our times right now. I think we'll be able to play this section and then talk about it before we go to a part 2.
All right. This is going to be a big one, I think.
This one's going to be a pretty big one, yeah. We're right now 9 minutes into a 23-minute narration. By the time we're done with this, we'll be at about 11 minutes.
Oh, that's perfect.
So we'll be about halfway. Yeah, so it's almost perfect.
It's almost like you planned it.
I know. It's like I planned it. Usually I cut it right when we get to something juicy. I'm giving the part oneers something juicy this time.
Yeah.
To think about before you go to part 2.
We'll reel you in later.
Check out this hollow moon theory.
All right.
Let's explore the realms of the extraordinary with the hollow moon theory. This controversial idea presents the moon not as a natural satellite, but as a possible artificial structure echoing with mysteries that challenge our understanding of the cosmos. The hollow moon theory emerged from the unexpected observations made during and after the Apollo missions. When the lunar modules from the Apollo missions impacted the moon's surface, the responses recorded by seismic instruments were unlike anything expected from a celestial body presumed to be geologically inactive. Upon the impact of the Apollo lunar modules, the moon reacted in a way that left scientists baffled. It vibrated, resonating like a bell. This reverberation lasted much longer than it would have on Earth, stirring up questions about the moon's internal structure. Normally, seismic waves dissipate quickly as they travel through geological materials, but on the moon, these vibrations persisted, suggesting an unusual internal composition. Moreover, the seismic waves traveled considerable distances across the lunar surface, indicating that the subsurface layers might be remarkably different from the Earth's. This phenomenon led to theories about large, open cavities or perhaps a less dense core, challenging the conventional understanding of lunar geology. Adding to the intrigue are the differences found in the composition of lunar rocks. These rocks, brought back to Earth by Apollo astronauts, were found to be older than the Earth itself, suggesting a very ancient origin. Some even contained processed metals such as brass and micas, which are generally not found in their natural state. Proponents of the hollow moon theory see these anomalies as possible evidence of an artificial origin. Further fueling this theory are observations of strange phenomena on the lunar surface. For instance, some lunar craters appear to be too shallow for their width, as if there is something more solid beneath the surface layers of dust and rock. Let's also mention again the moon's orbit, which is nearly a perfect circle, which is highly unusual for a natural satellite, and is seen by some as suggestive of a controlled artificial placement. The idea of the moon as an artificial structure tie into various ancient myths and legends about celestial beings and their influence on Earth. These stories, often dismissed as fanciful tales, gain new significance considering the hollow moon theory. Could there be a kernel of truth in these ancient narratives, hinting at a more profound and otherworldly connection with our moon?
Congratulations, you've watched Moonfall.
Is that what Moonfall's about?
Essentially, yeah, with another plot on top of it. But see, I am like the only person I've ever met that loved that movie. So hearing this, I'm like, against my own skepticism, I'm kind of like, yeah.
Well, so I don't know anything about Moonfall. Is it based on science that they kind of put a scientific, like sci-fi spin on it? I don't know what Moonfall's about. What's it? I guess give me the summary of the basics. Well, don't give away the plot.
No, I'll give it briefly away that it's based on the conspiracy of fake moon, an artificial moon, and then there's science thrown on there to support it. And then a bunch of crazy things happen. But it's
like with the moon?
Yeah, with the moon and the Earth. It's like, I'm sorry, all you infinite people who hate this movie. This is a fun adventure movie. Like, and this is what it is.
Is it a newer movie?
Yes.
Or is it an older movie?
Yeah, Netflix was really pushing it last year. Really pushing it.
And I didn't see it. It's on Netflix now, or it was on Netflix?
I think it's still on Netflix. In fact, I might watch it after again because man, you think people look down on you for suggesting that the moon isn't real? Try telling someone you liked Moonfall. It's like they smelled something bad. People get offended that I like Moonfall.
That's savage.
Yeah. But I mean, back on the original topic here, I really want this to be real. But there's only there's 1.4 on your list here, the lunar rock composition, where the rocks are older than those of the Earth. This is something you brought up on episode 2, and I've since looked into it, and there's something we have that the moon doesn't have that does explain this. That is the movement of tectonic plates and erosion and all the things on the Earth that is constantly cycling the rocks. So any rock on Earth is going to be younger than any individual rock on the moon.
Okay.
Okay. You look like you have something to say about that. Is there something coming that's going to talk about that, or?
I don't know, Nick.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, I'm learning all this like you.
You know. But
let me ask this question.
Yes.
Let me ask this question.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we dig into the Earth, does the rocks get younger or older?
As we dig into the Earth?
Yes, as we dig towards the core, is the rocks younger or older? And you said this.
Right. Yeah. So to a certain point, they would be older until you get to the, the heated inner parts, the parts where the plates are moving together. Because probably what you're thinking of is how we go through layers of history in the rocks as we go down.
Well, we're creating our top surface, right?
Right.
Yeah, so
but
they get
through
older.
the course of history, things do get cycled. Like things that used to be ocean floors, plates have ground together into mountaintops. And, that produces different kind of rocks, like sedimentary rocks and all that kind of stuff. So those would be considered brand new rocks, and they'd be up towards the surface. So when you go down to a point, it would be older. But as you come towards the top, where things are getting cycled towards, it would usually be newer.
Yeah, makes sense. If you're on the moon and you drill down, the rocks get older too, right?
I don't think it's necessarily the case of that, because they haven't got the cycling that we have. We don't got the plates.
So they'd be the same age, you think? Because there's not really anything to create.
Yes, that's what I would think. Unless
Interesting.
things have impacted the moon, and then there'd be newer ones on top from that.
That makes sense. Listen, hey, I like the way your mind thinks.
Yeah, now a scientist might come out and say that's wrong completely. But, they're free to do that. But you're supporting a hollow moon when you do that. So.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can really dispute on that, though. The other points are real interesting.
We haven't disputed anything yet. What did you dispute?
The problem with the moon rocks being
older than the other?
Yeah, I would expect that. I don't think that's anomalous, but the other points are interesting to me.
Remember that you said this. Remember this moment.
Okay.
Because it'll come back up in part 2, I believe.
I knew it. There was something you knew with that. But for now, I'm sticking to it. For now, I'm sticking to it.
I'm pretty sure we covered again. I'm pretty sure. Well, you got to remember, I cut half of this out.
Yeah. No, I'd be interested to hear more on that, because from what I looked up, I'm pretty confident in that particular part, but we'll see.
On Earth. But you got to go to because they drill on the moon too. That's where you got to start looking into some stuff.
Yeah. Even if on the moon it was that way, the statement that rocks on the moon being older than rocks on Earth doesn't mean anything to me. Now, there might be things about the moon that are surprising to me.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
If you dug into the moon, and I'm just throwing a hypothesis out there.
Yep.
If you dug into the moon and the rocks got younger, would that be weird?
I don't know. The reason
because we talk about impacts, right? We talk about the moon has impacts.
Dug in and they were younger.
It's kind of weird, isn't it?
Maybe.
Yeah, that'd be kind of weird.
Yeah, that would be weird. The only thing that I'd say is we know that the moon's impacted all the time. Maybe rocks from that are on the surface. I don't know. I think maybe it would be weird.
We think it's impacted all the time?
Yeah, well, that's what craters would be, I'd assume. Like the moon is
Well, for
impacted
sure.
by things quite frequently, I think.
So are we.
Normally they burn up in our atmosphere, I think. Other than like
do.
the Tunguska event or
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
They definitely do because we have a different set of elements in our atmosphere that causes things to burn
Yeah.
up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. But what I'm saying is that still comes to our planet's surface.
Right.
Not everything burns up. Like we still
No.
end up with, let's say if it's 100%, we still probably end up with 60 to 70% on our planet's surface in some form, whether it be dust or particulates or portions or parts or maybe the size of gravel. It's
Yeah,
kind of,
I'd say that's fair.
it's unusual.
Yeah.
It's kind of fair.
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
Now, one thing that I want to mention, and I think we brought this up in our second episode,
Yeah.
the Apollo missions that went up there.
Mm-hmm.
They was curious about the composition of the moon because they didn't have an answer back then.
Right.
So what they did was they added seismic sensors to the moon, and what their goal was, as they came off of the moon's surface,
Yeah.
the lunar surface, they have to do something with the part that explodes off of it, and then typically it just whatever it is.
Yeah.
They decided to turn it around and then impact the moon to see what kind of seismic activity it would have. Because on Earth, if we impact at that kind of velocity on Earth, and again, you mentioned it earlier, you know, obviously we've got Titanic, or not
Tectonic
Titanic,
plates.
but tectonic plates.
Yeah.
So we on Earth have reverberation. Like we still
yeah.
have it. There's
Oh yeah.
you're never going to get past that.
Yeah.
But typically, when we impact the Earth, there's a reverberation of a very minute amount.
Yeah.
The moon did it for a total of 90 minutes.
So
Reverberation.
now that's impressive to me.
Yeah.
Like I'm
So
not again a scientist, but that's interesting.
Scientists found it interesting.
Yeah.
And they had two hypotheses. The one that the bulk of it is the moon is very cavernous, is what they like to call it.
Well, I'll tell you, if that's the case, that is incredibly fascinating to me still too. Because what
for
could
sure.
possibly be in there? And maybe what's in there is causing all that volatile material that we talked about earlier. If that's the case.
Well, it changed their entire opinion on the moon because they assumed that it was very unlikely, based on some of the theories we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If you're looking at the giant impact hypothesis, it would not be cavernous.
Right. I think
There's no
accretion
way,
wouldn't
because-
make it cavernous either, right?
You are correct. You're correct. The only one that it would fit and make sense would be the capture. And the reason for that is we don't know what the composition would be inside. We captured it from outside.
Oh, now that turned out to be one of the bigger ones then. I'd be just as excited that the moon is cavernous as it being completely hollow. In fact, I'd be more excited about cavernous moon.
Well, and here's the way but to see it all aligns. This is why I built the science first.
Yep.
Because we go, well, if it's cavernous, then when we look at the accretion theory, I'm going to say it correctly going forward,
Okay.
since my narration corrected me.
That
If
bad
we're
guy.
looking at that theory, yeah, exactly. Lawrence, thank
Lawrence, you're fired now too. No, just kidding.
you. Nah, we're keeping Lawrence. He's keeping me on
Lawrence
pace.
is good.
If we look at the accretion theory, cavernous is impossible because we'd have a very, very similar composition to Earth
Right.
because it was created at the same time, the same way with the same materials.
Yep. I would expect it to be quite dense, in fact.
Correct. Giant impact theory, I would say that it could not potentially be cavernous. And the reason for that is if this secondary planet comes in and smacks it, it would have had to be hard enough for both planets to basically break apart and then bring themselves back together. So it'd be very close to the Accretion theory.
Okay.
In that regard, as far as the composition. Now, the capture theory, I mean, we don't know what it could be potentially made of because it's not necessarily the same composition. But that said, why do we have a perfect, darn near perfect circular rotation?
It's interesting stuff there.
And this is why science is confused.
Yeah.
There is those people in the science community. And if we're being honest, some of you is probably like, how in the world did he find out all this stuff that makes things right and wrong? I started with the giant impact hypothesis. And then I went to the next 5 and I go, why do they think that's dumb? And then I wrote them all down. Then I went to the next one. I said, why does giant impact think these people's idiots? Oh, that's why. And now I'm just bringing it together going, you give me the theory. But now when we look at the Apollo missions, which when you think about it, wasn't that long ago for us.
Right.
They thought that there's going to be a certain set of things. And then they get there, they look at seismic activity and they go, well, that wasn't supposed to happen.
On our break, when we split the episodes, I'm going to look up something just in case I'm mistaken or if it was a joke. But a number of years back, I had heard that the U.S. was going to fire upon the moon to get...
That is correct.
To throw up dust to check out the composition.
That is correct.
So that's... I would be interested to look into that more to see what they found from that as well.
Yeah. We looked at even at one point hitting it with nuclear payload.
Yeah, I heard that. I remember thinking at the time, though, if the moon's hollow, that might collapse it all in. I hope they don't do that. So at least at one time, I was believing on this.
Well, here's what's interesting. We talked about the fact that there's no atmosphere on the moon, correct? But did you know, and this was brought up, the crater depth of the moon, when you look at the biggest crater patterns or a crater like an impact site, and you look at a smaller one, what do you notice?
I'm not sure. What do I notice?
The depth is pretty much the same.
That's interesting. So there might be a maximum that it can penetrate before it hits something. Is that what you're possibly alluding to?
I didn't say that, but it's a funny thing, is it not?
That is funny.
Because if it's cavernous,
right, should hit a cavern or cave something.
I would assume that it would.
That's a lot to think about. That is a lot to think about.
Now, in addition to that, when you look at the moon, right? When you look at what's truly there, the moon has some things that's in quite a bit of abundance, like brass, in which when you look at brass here, brass is not typically found naturally.
You have to smelt that out, don't you? Or
well, you do, Nick. That's right.
Yeah. That's interesting. That's also interesting.
And Micas.
Mica?
Yeah. Okay. It's not natural, correct?
I might be thinking of something. Are you saying M-I-C-H-A?
M-I-C-A-S. Micas.
Okay, I don't know what that is, so I can't say.
So, those are the two biggest things. And Micas is going to be the equivalent of like volcanic rock.
Oh, okay. That's interesting also.
It is interesting.
But I think that
because what was you saying earlier? What was you saying earlier, though?
Yeah, we don't have tectonic, or the moon doesn't have tectonic plates.
Well, that's right.
That we know of. Yeah. So how'd that get there?
But yeah, we got this volcanic rock that's up there, Nick. That's so weird.
Could that come from fiery asteroids and that kind of thing?
Not that kind of rock. Assumed. I don't know.
Okay.
What I saw was the answer was no, but I don't know that to be true.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I would say for anyone that questions that, go to the Google machine and go to some scientific journals and you figure it out. I dumbed this down to my level, and that's what the dumbed down version said.
Yeah, I'm just throwing things out there because that is quite interesting. Because of things that I am sure of in this episode, I feel like there's not tectonic plates, and I don't think any of the theories, including this one, say that there is.
Correct. But everything's saying that it's cavernous at best, except it doesn't make sense that all the impacts are about the same depth.
So theoretically,
and the
I
way
would
that I
lean more towards it being constructed.
Well, I mean, I didn't say that.
I think you're leading me to that.
If you got a sandbox out in the backyard and you take a grape and you throw it into the sandbox, and you take a baseball and you throw it into the sandbox, is the depth the same?
It should be very different depths.
It should be significantly different.
Until it hits the wooden bottom of the sandbox.
Ain't that a coincidence?
The moon is a sandbox.
It's dust. If you think about it, the surface is mostly dust.
Yeah. Interesting where this could go to. Are we going to hear more about this particular one, or is this the only covering we're doing?
Oh, you're going to hear a lot of this. There's a lot of
okay.
stuff that's on repeat.
Oh, okay.
In fact, the very next section, which will be part 2, I'm sorry, folks, we're going to go into some things from the Apollo mission that should never happen.
Yeah, the stuff you said
Scientifically, it should
already,
never happen.
I already didn't know. So I'm going to be super educated by the end of this. I can feel it.
So there's things that I looked at when I did this. And again, I've always been told this is what the moon is. The rest is just fairy tales and good boy stories and stuff like that. And I heard one thing. This is what made me think a long time ago.
Right.
I listened to one guy. This was back before I was on the internet all the time. There used to be an AM radio station. For you young kids, that's when we had a dial on our radio and we had to tune things in.
It's been a while.
It's been a while since but there was a guy on a radio station. I want to say it was like 6:10 a.m. It doesn't matter. But he was talking about the fact that he believed that the moon was a different structure. And I remember I was probably like 15, 16 years old. I was like, this guy's a wackadoodle. He's been smoking the ganja.
Right.
Because clearly the moon is what it is. And his exact words almost an hour later, because I listened to him because I'm like, I want to see where this goes. And he said, since the beginning of time, we've been told what the moon is, but we don't know. And then he brought up some of the stuff from the Apollo mission. And I found it so fascinating. And even to this day, it's almost like if you say something about the moon, you're chastised to a degree because they go, it's there. It's obviously there. It's obviously. Most people would fall into the giant impact, which is kind of where you started. This is what it is. And if you can't accept that, then there's something wrong with you.
A lot of this is
just some of the
triggering
questions.
memories of things that I think we'll get into in part 2. I don't want to start up now because I think they're going to be quite long ones. But
oh, yeah,
I have some reasons why it could be what some people are proposing, and I'll get into that next time.
The next one. So the very next section we're covering is the Apollo space mission. That's what I was going to talk about. It's not super deep because we covered part of it here. We're going to cover another part because I want to split these two sections up. No one's been able to explain to me the next section, no matter what they do, no matter what they say. In fact, the people that was at my house this weekend, when they looked at me like I was a wackadoodle, I said, "Did you know this?" And they both looked at me like I didn't know that. And I go, "How would that be there?"
I'm excited for the next part.
Be there?
And
well, that's going to be a part tour.
yeah, luckily for me, I don't have to wait as long as the rest of you.
Correct. Are you ready to hear about the Apollo space mission and how we found things there that no one can answer for me? And maybe you can. Maybe those listeners, when they come back, will be able to answer it for me. But do you want to hear what that is?
I do.
Let's stop talking about it. Let's be about it. Let's go. Listen, we gave you the first one for free. You got to work for the rest of them. You just can't be coming in here expecting to get all the candy up front. It's like my kids. Did I eat enough to get this snack? No. Eat the rest of it.
Eat it
Suckers.
all. Eat it all.
Eat it all. Eat everything on your plate and then come back to me and then we'll talk about if you get the treat or not.
Yeah. And while you're waiting,
That's just
watch
how it
some
is.
other episodes just to have some fun.
Exactly. Which some of y'all are. Thank you so much. Y'all are doggone superstars. I mean, you could be anywhere in the world and you're sitting here talking to us. That's perfect.
Yeah.
That's all I can ask for.
We've had some spectacular comments on the videos. There was one really long one that was agreeing with us.
Oh my gosh, I know.
Was agreeing with us on the Oak
sent that
Island
one to
mystery. Yeah. He agreed with us, but he was 10 times as educated as we are. So he had the rest of the story way deeper. So thank you so much for that.
Deeper. That's the kind of stuff that I love. I love when we see the interactions like that. We're like, man, like there's things that people tell me after and I'm like, I never thought of that. Like that never crossed my mind. So little things like that. Listen, I will never take offense even if that guy would have came back and would have been like, I listened to everything you guys said. I think you guys are off. Here's what I think actually happened. It was way off our theory.
Yeah.
I'd still look at it and be like, wow,
that's a win. If you come in here and say, I think you're wrong, but you also come with, here's my theory instead, that's just as good as agreeing. In fact, it's better than agreeing without a reason, right?
Right. Exactly. But man, we covered some fascinating things. I can promise you the next one, it's got some crazy conversations Nick and I had about a lot of different things. Some things he did not know.
Most, I'd say.
Not gonna say how far down the football field I had him walk.
You'll never know unless you watch the next one.
You'll never know until the end of this one. Or the next one, should I say. But man, thank you all so much for stopping by. Definitely appreciate it. Until we see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.
See you later.